Your soulmate secretly returned $1 million engagement gift. The reason broke everyone's heart. My beloved child. Your soulmate quietly returned $1 million engagement gift, and no one understood why. Not their family. Not the person who had offered it. Not even the people who believed they knew every detail of what was happening behind closed doors. The gift wasn't simply expensive, it represented a future already being arranged around them. Yet late one evening, your soulmate placed it carefully back inside its case, sealed it, and sent it away without telling anyone. When the family discovered what had happened, the room went silent. Someone finally asked, "Do you understand what you just gave up?" Your soulmate didn't argue. They didn't look confused. They simply lowered their eyes and said, "I understand exactly what I gave up." But that wasn't the sentence that broke everyone's heart. The painful part came when someone demanded to know what could possibly matter more than the life this gift promised. Your soulmate hesitated, reached into their pocket, and touched something they had secretly carried for months. It wasn't another expensive object. It was something connected to you. Something so ordinary that, at first, nobody understood why your soulmate guarded it more carefully than a gift worth a fortune. That contrast changed the entire atmosphere. They could have chosen comfort, approval, and a future that looked perfect from the outside. Instead, they had returned all of it. Why? Because accepting that engagement gift would have required them to pretend something inside their heart had disappeared when it hadn't. Don't skip, because there was another detail nobody knew yet: your soulmate hadn't returned the gift impulsively. They had spent several nights staring at it, trying to convince themselves that choosing the easier path would eventually make the feelings go away. But every time they imagined standing beside someone else and promising forever, one memory of you returned stronger than before. Finally, someone in the room noticed your soulmate's hands trembling and quietly asked, "Is this really about that person?" Your soulmate looked up, and their expression answered before their lips ever could. Then came the confession nobody expected. Your soulmate admitted they weren't rejecting the $1 million gift because they hated the person who offered it. That would have been easier for everyone to understand. They returned it because accepting something so meaningful while secretly loving you felt cruel. They deserve someone whose whole heart is available, your soulmate whispered. Mine isn't. Suddenly, the anger in the room disappeared. One relative turned away with tears in their eyes. Another sat down without speaking. Because they finally realized your soulmate hadn't thrown away a fortune, they had refused to purchase happiness with someone else's heartbreak. But there was still one unanswered question hanging over everyone: if their heart belonged to you so completely, why hadn't they simply come to you? Your soulmate slowly pulled that small object from their pocket and placed it on the table. The moment the family recognized what it was, one person covered their mouth in shock. Because that tiny thing revealed the real reason your soulmate had stayed away from you all this time, and it was far more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. The tiny object resting on the table was an old folded note, one connected to the last meaningful moment your soulmate shared with you before everything changed. The edges were worn because they had opened it countless times, especially on nights when they almost convinced themselves to move forward without you. One family member recognized it immediately and whispered, "You still have that?" Your soulmate nodded. But then they revealed something nobody knew. They had interpreted your final words as a quiet goodbye. They believed you had already decided they weren't the person you wanted beside you. So instead of risking another rejection, they disappeared behind silence and allowed everyone around them to believe they were ready for someone new. Yet when that $1 million engagement gift arrived, pretending suddenly became impossible. The gift forced one terrifying question into their mind: could they really promise their future to someone else while still carrying your words against their heart? Your soulmate unfolded the note and pointed to one sentence. For months, they had read those words as proof that you wanted distance. But someone sitting across the table stared at the sentence and noticed something your soulmate had completely missed. Wait, they said. What if that isn't what they meant? Your soulmate froze. The room became painfully quiet. Suddenly, everyone was reading the same words differently. What your soulmate had understood as rejection could have been you protecting yourself because you believed they had already chosen to leave. Two people may have been standing on opposite sides of the same misunderstanding, each waiting for the other to make a move. Stay till the end, because that possibility shook your soulmate more deeply than losing the $1 million gift ever could. They had returned an engagement gift to avoid living a lie. But now they were discovering that the separation between you might have been built on another lie neither of you intentionally created. That was when an older relative finally admitted something they had kept secret. Months earlier, shortly after you and your soulmate became distant, someone had contacted the family with information about you. Your soulmate immediately looked up. What information? They demanded. The relative hesitated, clearly wishing they had never opened the subject. Apparently, your soulmate had been told that you were moving forward, that you no longer wanted this connection, and that reaching out would only disturb your new life. Your soulmate had believed it because it seemed to match the painful meaning they had already attached to your note. But now the relative confessed they had never personally verified any of it. Your soulmate's face changed. The heartbreak became something sharper, confusion mixed with urgency. Who told you that? They asked. Nobody answered at first. Then the relative quietly revealed a name. Your soulmate went completely still, because this wasn't a stranger. It was someone they had trusted, and suddenly, returning that $1 million gift was only the beginning of what they needed to uncover. Your soulmate recognized the name instantly, and the color seemed to drain from their face. This person had been close enough to know when your connection was vulnerable, close enough to hear private conversations, and trusted enough that nobody had questioned their claims about you. But when your soulmate demanded proof that you had truly moved on, the story began falling apart. There were no messages from you. No direct conversation. No undeniable evidence. Just carefully repeated statements that had slowly become accepted as truth. Your soulmate looked back at the worn note on the table, realizing how perfectly everything had worked together: the misunderstood words, the sudden distance, the family pressure, and eventually that $1 million engagement gift. For the first time, they wondered whether they had been making life-changing decisions based on something that was never true. Then your soulmate asked the question everyone had been avoiding: why would someone want me to believe that? Nobody answered. But one relative remembered something strange. Shortly before the engagement arrangement began, that trusted person had repeatedly encouraged your soulmate to stop waiting for you and choose the secure future being offered instead. At the time, it sounded like practical advice. Now it sounded completely different. Your soulmate stood up and began searching through old messages, dates, and conversations. Something huge was waiting for them. Buried deep in an old exchange was a message they had overlooked because they were hurting too much to examine it carefully. It suggested that someone knew you had tried to reach out during the exact period your soulmate believed you wanted nothing more to do with them. Their hands started shaking. "You mean they knew?" your soulmate whispered. "They knew I was waiting." But the discovery became even more painful when another family member finally admitted what happened to that attempted contact. Your message had apparently reached someone around your soulmate, but it never reached your soulmate directly. Instead, they were told you had remained silent. Imagine what that meant. While you may have believed your soulmate ignored you, your soulmate had been sitting somewhere else believing you had chosen not to reach out at all. Two hearts were wounded by the same silence, but neither of you may have created it. Suddenly, everyone understood why your soulmate returned that $1 million engagement gift. Some part of them had never accepted that your story was truly finished. Yet one mystery remained. Your soulmate stared at the relative who had made the confession and asked, "Where is the message now?" The relative hesitated before revealing something nobody expected. The original message might still exist, and what you actually said could change everything your soulmate believed about the day you disappeared from each other's lives. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the relative reached for an old phone that had been stored away after an upgrade, saying there was a chance the original message had never been deleted. Your soulmate stood beside them as they searched through years of archived conversations, their heart pounding harder with every swipe. Finally, your name appeared. The date matched perfectly, the very week your soulmate had been told you wanted nothing more to do with them. But the message wasn't cold. It wasn't a goodbye. Your words carried uncertainty, hurt, and one unmistakable question: whether your soulmate still wanted you in their life. Your soulmate read it twice, then a third time. Their eyes filled with tears because they suddenly understood something devastating. You hadn't abandoned them. You had been waiting for an answer that never came. But there was more. Beneath your first message was another one sent days later, and this one changed the entire room. You had written again because you were worried your first message hadn't reached them. You didn't demand anything. You simply made it clear that if your soulmate wanted distance, you would respect it, but you needed to know the truth directly from them. Your soulmate covered their mouth, struggling to speak. For months, they had believed your silence was the answer. Meanwhile, you may have believed their silence was yours. The family finally saw why the $1 million engagement gift could never compete with what your soulmate was carrying inside. Money could promise comfort, but it couldn't erase the realization that the person they truly loved had once reached toward them, and someone else had allowed that moment to disappear. Then your soulmate noticed something beside the second message. A tiny status marker showing that the conversation had been forwarded. Their sadness instantly turned into suspicion. "Who received this?" they asked. The relative stared at the screen and went pale. After several uncomfortable seconds, they opened the forwarding details, and the same trusted person's name appeared again. Now coincidence was becoming impossible to believe. That person hadn't merely heard about your message, they had apparently seen it. Your soulmate immediately demanded to know why someone who knew you were still reaching out would tell everyone the opposite. But before anyone could answer, another notification appeared from the restored archive, an old voice message attached to the conversation. It was from that same person, recorded only minutes after your message arrived. Your soulmate pressed play, and within the first few seconds, everyone realized the $1 million engagement gift was connected to a secret far bigger than they had imagined. The voice recording began calmly, almost casually, but one sentence made your soulmate stop breathing for a moment. The trusted person had said your message should not be passed along yet because your soulmate needed time to move forward. Then came something even stranger. They mentioned the wealthy engagement arrangement before your soulmate had ever been officially introduced to it. Suddenly, the timeline changed. This wasn't simply someone making a bad decision while trying to protect them. They already knew another future was being prepared. Your soulmate replayed the recording, listening carefully to every word. Why had your message been treated like an obstacle? Why had someone decided they had the right to choose which truth your soulmate could hear? Across the room, the unopened case that once held the $1 million gift suddenly seemed less like a symbol of security and more like evidence of how close your soulmate had come to living someone else's plan. Then the relative revealed another uncomfortable detail. The family offering the engagement gift had apparently been told that your soulmate was completely unattached emotionally and ready to begin again. But nobody had told them about you. Nobody had mentioned the unanswered messages or the unresolved connection. That realization broke something open in the room. Even the people who had supported the engagement began understanding why returning the gift had been necessary. Your soulmate wasn't rejecting generosity. They were refusing to accept a promise built on incomplete truth. And strangely, the person who had offered the gift had responded with unexpected compassion after learning it was being returned. Instead of becoming furious, they had sent one short message: "Please don't marry anyone until you know who your heart is waiting for." Your soulmate stared at those words for a long moment. Someone they barely knew had shown more respect for their feelings than the person they had trusted for years. But your soulmate still needed one answer before coming toward you. They needed to know whether the interference had ended with those hidden messages, or whether something else had happened afterward. So they searched deeper into the restored phone. That was when they found a screenshot dated several weeks after your second attempt to reach them. It showed a message apparently sent to you, supposedly on your soulmate's behalf. Your soulmate's expression changed immediately because they had never written those words. The message was brief, final, and painfully convincing. It told you not to wait anymore. It made it sound as though your soulmate had deliberately chosen another path. "I never sent this," your soulmate whispered. Nobody spoke. Because if you received that message and believed it was truly from them, then your soulmate finally understood why you stopped reaching out, and the next discovery would reveal exactly who had sent it. Your soulmate stared at the screenshot until the words blurred through their tears. The message sounded believable because whoever wrote it knew exactly how your soulmate spoke, the phrases they used, the restrained way they expressed emotion, even the kind of goodbye they might have written when overwhelmed. But there was one tiny mistake. A phrase near the end was something your soulmate never used. They had heard it repeatedly from only one person, the same trusted individual whose name appeared throughout the hidden messages. Suddenly, the room felt colder. Your soulmate wasn't looking at a misunderstanding anymore. Someone had apparently stepped between two people, controlled what each side believed, and allowed silence to finish the damage. They made you think I rejected you, your soulmate whispered, almost speaking directly to you. And they made me think you had already left. But one question remained: why would anyone go this far just to keep you apart? The answer began emerging when another relative remembered a private conversation from months earlier. The trusted person had been deeply involved in encouraging the wealthy engagement because they believed it would improve the family's future, reputation, and opportunities. To them, your connection represented uncertainty, the $1 million engagement represented security. But they had misunderstood something fundamental about your soulmate. They assumed enough comfort could eventually replace genuine love. Instead, the expensive gift did the opposite. The moment your soulmate held it, they imagined accepting it, standing beside someone else, and carrying your memory secretly for years. That vision frightened them more than losing every advantage the arrangement promised. So they returned the gift without negotiation. And now, discovering how carefully the truth had been controlled made their decision feel even more irreversible. They weren't grieving the fortune they had surrendered. They were grieving the months with you that nobody could return. Then your soulmate did something the family wasn't prepared for. They took their phone, walked away from the table, and searched for your contact. Their finger hovered above your name. They wanted to call immediately, but stopped. Not because they doubted their feelings. Because they suddenly realized you might still believe that cruel message came directly from them. What could they possibly say after so much silence? Would you answer? Would you believe the truth? Before they could decide, the relative holding the restored phone called them back. There was one final archived attachment connected to your conversation, something nobody had opened before. It wasn't another screenshot. It was an audio message recorded by you after receiving that false goodbye. Your soulmate pressed play, expecting anger. Instead, they heard the emotion in your voice. And within seconds, they sank into the nearest chair, because your final words revealed something they never knew you had been waiting for them to do. Your voice on that old recording wasn't angry. That was what shattered your soulmate. You sounded hurt, but beneath the hurt was something they never expected to hear after all these months: hope. You had said that if those goodbye words truly came from them, you would respect their decision, but if there had been some misunderstanding, you wanted them to come to you themselves. No messenger. No family member. No one speaking between you. Just them. Your soulmate lowered the phone and stared into the distance as the meaning settled in. You had left one final door open, and they had never known it existed. Suddenly, returning the $1 million engagement gift made complete sense to everyone in that room. Your soulmate hadn't thrown away their future. Without realizing it, they had refused to close the only door their hearts still wanted to walk through. For the first time that night, your soulmate stopped asking the family what they should do. They already knew. They carefully folded your old note and placed it back into their pocket, then looked at the empty engagement case sitting nearby. One represented everything they could have gained by choosing the safer path. The other represented something money could never guarantee, the possibility of being loved without pretending. Your soulmate finally said, "I returned that gift because I couldn't promise forever while wondering whether the person I love was still waiting for the truth." Nobody tried to stop them. Even the relative who had supported the wealthy engagement began crying, realizing how much pain had grown from decisions made on your soulmate's behalf. But your soulmate wasn't interested in revenge. They wanted one thing now, an honest conversation.